So here's a video for period 3, the post-classical age, from 600 to 1450. So this is before Columbus. This one's going to be a little bit longer because there were a lot of chapters, but I will try to go as fast as I can. So the first chapter was chapter 17 on the Byzantine Empire and Kievan Rus. So the Byzantine Empire, so let me backtrack. The end of period 2 is when all those classical empires fell, like ancient Rome, etc. So when Rome falls, the eastern half of the empire becomes the Byzantine Empire because they do not fall. Their leader was Justinian the Great. Remember, he created the law code. His wife Theodora was really influential on him, so they did some better things for women. They owned Constantinople. I think that was their capital, which was a great, huge city, learning, lots of trading. And religiously, they were Eastern Orthodox. So this is different from the Roman Empire, who is Catholic, and this is the first split to happen in Christianity. So before this, it was just Catholics, and now you have Catholics and Eastern Orthodox over in the Byzantine Empire. And they were a theocracy, so Justinian the Great ruled as a religious ruler, and he built the Hagia Sophia, which you can see here in this picture. Good example of monumental architecture showing his power, also just a beautiful building that still exists. All right, and then Kievan Rus is in Russia, so it's kind of weird that they have the chapter together, but they influence each other a lot. So today, all of this is Russia, but then just right here was Kievan Rus. So it was a series of city-states in what is today Russia, and the Byzantine Empire had sent missionaries there to try to convert them, and they did, and they converted them to Eastern Orthodox Christianity, which is why Russia was Eastern Orthodox Christian in the beginning. So beginning stages of Russia, Kievan Rus. They become Eastern Orthodox because of the influence of the Byzantine Empire. All right, chapter 8 was all about Islam. So time period 3 is when Islam is created and spreads. The founder of Islam is Muhammad. At first, he preached to get followers, and not many. I think it was something like in the first year, he only got like 50 followers. But then he started trading. Remember, trading super important because he was a merchant, and through trade, the religion really spread. The religion has 5 pillars, or 5 bases to its faith. The first one is believing in one God, that is Allah. The second one is praying 5 times a day. You can see an example of that in the picture. The third one is giving alms or money to the poor. The fourth one is fasting, which means like not eating during the daytime, during Ramadan. And then the last one is making a pilgrimage to Mecca, or traveling to visit Mecca, if you can afford it at least once in your lifetime. And when they pray every day, they have to be facing Mecca because that is their holy city. So after Muhammad's death, Islam kind of split over who was going to rule afterwards, and we end up with the Sunnis and the Shiites. Okay. The caliphs are the first group who continue to spread Islam after Muhammad dies. They spread the empire, they spread the religion, they spread the language. They take over parts of what was the Persian Empire. They also take over parts of the Byzantine Empire. But they don't force people to convert. However, they do have that jizya, the tax, where you have to pay the tax if you don't convert. So a lot of people convert for that reason. After that, after the caliphs were the Umayyads, they expanded Islam, you can't see, into Spain, but then they fell, and they were Sunni Muslims. The Abbasids were also Sunni. They were a very powerful empire, and they moved the capital to Baghdad. This is what Baghdad would have looked like back then. It's like a huge walled city. You can see the kind of irrigation going through it with this little river, all the farmland around it. Really spectacular planned city. And this was the golden age of learning. In Baghdad, they converted a ton of texts into Arabic and preserved a lot of learning. The Abbasids, since they controlled part of what was the Persian Empire, a lot of the Persians converted to Islam and contributed a lot to learning. Sorry for all my typos here. One of the examples is Rumi, who was that poet who would spin around in the circles and would spout out his beautiful poetry that I still thoroughly enjoy today. And then finally, the Turks invade and take over, but then the Mongols invade and take over after that. And we'll talk about the Mongols in a little bit. Chapter 9 was about Africa. So at this time, we've got a couple different things going on in Africa. You've got the Bantu migration. So the Bantus starting off here, spreading all the way down to the southern coast. Remember, they spread technology like iron, canoes, farming, and they also spread diseases. They also kind of ruined the environment. Remember, they would go down and farm it until they couldn't farm it anymore and then leave. This is also when the trans-Saharan trade is happening in the northern part of Africa. And before this, they weren't using camels. Now they are using camels, and so they can trade much more effectively because if you're going to try to cross a desert, camels would probably be your best option. The trans-Saharan trade, since Islam expands and takes over northern Africa, Muslim merchants really expand the trans-Saharan trade. And they're trading things like gold, salt, and slaves. Okay. The Indian Ocean trade over on this side of Africa is also gearing up because the Islamic merchants took over and are trading more. Okay. Ghana is a huge empire. You can see it right there in purple. Ghana sold to Muslim traders across the trans-Saharan trade. That's how they made a lot of their wealth. Not where current-day Ghana is, which is a little bit confusing. Mali Empire, we can see here, is a little bit bigger in blue. They had the city Timbuktu, which was a big center of learning. If you remember in the Roots video, that's where he was going. They taxed people. Mansa Musa was from Mali, so remember we've got all of our M's. Mansa Musa is from Mali. He was trying to travel to get to Mecca, which, if you look on this map, is all the way over here. When he travels, he gives away lots of money, and then that makes the price of everything go up. And he was Muslim, so lots of nice M's with his name. Zimbabwe is another empire. They're even stronger. They built Great Zimbabwe, which is a huge city that they built. Oh, I was going to put a picture, and then I forgot. Anyways, they built Great Zimbabwe, but then they abandoned it because they had ruined the environment. So they had overgrazed all the land. They had no farmable land left, so they left. Most societies during this time in Africa are matrilineal, so the women are the ones who kind of have more of the power, and the family line goes through them. Wealth was based on slavery, so they had slavery at this time, and how many slaves you had determined how wealthy you were. But it's not slavery like we saw in the Americas. So enslaved peoples were usually taken as like prisoners of war, but they were still allowed to be part of the family, etc. Swahili forms. So over here, all these circles are the Swahili city-states. So as the Bantu spread down and as Arabic came over, they combined to create Swahili. And the Swahili city-states were really big in trading in the Indian Ocean trade. And then religiously, most of Africa, North Africa, is Muslim. Okay? Down here are still a lot of polytheistic religions, a lot of animism and ancestor veneration. And then Ethiopia, which is over here, is Christian. They had an emperor who really pushed Christianity, and so they did convert to Christianity. And if you remember from period 5, when Europeans take over, Ethiopia is the only place not to get taken over. And they tried to use the justification of, like, we're Christian, don't take us over because you're Christian as well. I don't know how much that had to do with them not getting taken over, but they were the only country not to get taken over. All right, chapter 10 was on East Asia in the post-classical era, so you do need to know that East Asia means China. Okay, so we've got the Sui, Tang, and Song dynasty in period 3. I think that one's easy to remember because it's period 3, and there's 3 dynasties. The Sui dynasty unites China. They also build the Grand Canal. Here's a picture of the Grand Canal so you can just see how far it went through China and connected up to the Silk Road. The Tang dynasty created the tributary system, so other places that they took over would have to pay them tribute. They also created the civil service exam, and if you did well on it, you could move up in the social status. Buddhism really spreads to China under the Tang dynasty. They also create something called the equal field system, which the goal was to give everyone an equal plot of land. But they weren't doing it because they wanted to help the poor. The government was feeling like the landowners were getting too wealthy and having too much power, so they wanted to take their land away. So they thought, let's make an equal field system and give everyone land, and that way no one would be more powerful than the government. Ultimately, though, it fails. And then they also had the fast ripening rice, the champa rice, and I tried to look up a picture of it. This is what came up. I don't know if this is rice, but perhaps that's what rice looks like when it grows. And the champa rice was primarily built, I think it was in the south, and so they had to use the Grand Canal to get it up to the north so people could eat. The Song dynasty, probably not my favorite. They start the beginning stages of industrialization. They start manufacturing guns, and they also start foot binding. All of these dynasties traded on the Silk Road. They developed the flying cash, or that banking system where you could deposit your coins, etc. The compass is invented. The junk ship is invented. Religiously, most of China at this time is Taoist or Confucian, and Buddhism starts to spread. Buddhism combines with Taoism to make Zen Buddhism. And then Buddhism combines with Confucianism to make Neo-Confucianism. So you've got two syncretic religions there that you could use as examples when talking about syncretic religions. Japan at this time is scared of China, so they're like, let's be like China. And they try and they like send people to China to learn about everything Chinese, but it doesn't work, and so then they become feudal instead. And so they live on their manors and have their samurai. Korea is all about China, so they, remember the word sinification is assimilation, so they assimilate a lot to Chinese culture, probably because they're partially scared as well. Vietnam, however, does not. They do not welcome Chinese culture, they don't want to be like the Chinese, and they have nuclear families, which are those smaller families of just like mom, dad, and kids, and not living with your grandparents and aunts and uncles. All right, chapter 11 was about South Asia and Southeast Asia. So South Asia, India, Southeast Asia, all of these places like the islands and Korea, Thailand, Cambodia, etc. So period 2 was like a great time for India where they were united under the Gupta Empire. But in period 3, after the Gupta Empire falls, no one can unite them. Muslims invade northern India. At first, it does not go well. They try to destroy all of the Hindu and Buddhist shrines, but then people don't want to convert because they just destroyed all of their shrines. So a lot of people don't initially convert to Islam, and there's a lot of power struggles in the north over who's going to rule. In southern India, they're mainly focused on the Indian Ocean trade. They're trading fabrics. They're getting a lot of spices from Southeast Asia. They're trading with enslaved people through Africa and the Middle East, ivory and gold, silk, dates, food, etc. And Islam actually spreads easier to the southern half because a lot of these merchants that were traveling around the Indian Ocean were Muslim, and they would stay on the coast of India, marry women there, and then convert them. And so Islam spread a little bit easier that way. Islam also spread in among Buddhist populations. So remember, Buddhism starts in India in period 2, but really spreads to China and becomes more popular. A lot of Buddhists in India were struggling because the leaders or whatever were very corrupt and were taking a lot of money, and so a lot of them converted to Islam to escape that corruption. Caste system is still very strong. Hinduism is still very strong. And in Cambodia, which is over here, Angkor Wat is built because Buddhism spreads there, and it's an example of the spread of the religion. All right, chapter 12 was on Western Rome. So we talked about how Eastern Rome becomes the Byzantine Empire. Western Rome becomes a feudal society. So they fall at the end of period 2. Remember, they got invaded by the nomads. They're getting a lot of disease spreading there. Their people revolt against them, and the entire Roman Empire falls. And so they become a feudal society. People move on to their farms, their manors. There's serfs, peasants who are working at the bottom. There's knights who are protecting these nobles, these wealthy nobles. And then there's the king. So they still have a king and queen. It's still a monarchy. But all of these people below the king live on that one farm for their whole life and probably don't see other people. Again, like we talked about with the Byzantine Empire, the church splits. So Western Rome stays Catholic, but Eastern Rome becomes Eastern Orthodox. And I tried to get, oh, here we go, we can zoom in. Some similarities and differences between them. So the Catholic Church, all of their things are in Latin. The Pope has authority over everything. Priests can't marry and divorce is not permitted. Whereas in Eastern Orthodox Christianity, they conducted their services in Greek or whatever local language was there. The bishops were the head, and the emperor, did have more power than the religion did. Priests could marry and they could get divorced. Similarities, both still believe in Jesus and the Bible. They both still do baptism. They both still are trying to convert people. But you have some of those major other differences. Okay. No. Just trying to get it perfectly centered. Okay, this is also the time of the Crusades. So in Europe, they go and try to reclaim the Holy Land, and it's a failure. And then finally, at the very end of period 3, they start the Renaissance. It's really in period 4, but you start to see the beginnings of them coming out of feudalism, creating the beautiful artwork again, philosophy, etc., that you'll really see in period 4. All right. Chapter 13 is all about the Mongols, probably one of your favorite chapters. The Mongols were nomadic pastoralists. So nomadic, they moved around from place to place. And pastoralists, they had like groups of animals with them, like their horses. Genghis Khan is their initial leader. Here's a picture of him right there. Genghis Khan ruled really brutally, but very smart. So he would go and take over cities. He would ask the city if they wanted to surrender first. If they said no, he usually killed everyone. And if they said yes, he didn't kill everyone and he took over. After he dies, his grandsons take over. One grandson, Batu, rules Russia. This grandson, don't know how to say it, Hulagu, rules the Middle East and takes over the Abbasid Empire. And Kublai Khan takes over China. Eventually, all three of them lose that area. Okay, Russia, remember, was like secretly keeping extra money, built up an army, and kicked him out. And then I remember in China, they just eventually move on to a new dynasty and kick them out because they don't want foreigners anymore. Some cool things about the Mongols, they revitalized the Silk Road, made it really safe. They had one international law, which was really effective. They did help transmit the Black Plague because they made the Silk Road so safe that those fleas with the ticks that carried the Black Plague went on the Silk Road and then ended up in Europe where everyone dies. Not everyone, but a lot of people. Women are more independent in the Mongol culture. They invented pants and siege warfare. And they could, like the picture, they were expert horse riders. They slept on their horses, but they didn't really cross water. So they end up being the largest land empire ever. They try to take over Japan. They do try to cross the ocean, but they die in a tsunami each time. They try to invade twice, and each time, like, don't make it there. So clearly weren't fit for the sea, but did very well on their horses and had a huge land empire. And then your last chapter is the Americas on the eve of globalization. So the Americas before the Europeans get there. So a couple just major groups to know. The Mississippians were in present-day Mississippi. They created those large mounds that we looked at in class. We don't know why they declined. They just kind of left their big cities. The Toltec, they had a tribute system. So they would conquer other places and make them pay them tribute. And they conquered the Mayans, who were period 2. The Aztec, you can see here on the picture, are in present-day Mexico. They were initially hunter-gatherers, and then they moved to what is today Mexico City. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. They built the Chinampas, which were those floating gardens. They had a tribute system also, like the Toltec, and they had a theocracy. And then finally, the Incas, which are down here in South America, they had split theirs up into 4 provinces, kind of like city-states, and that's how they ruled. They didn't do tribute system, but they did the Mita system. So that's when all the boys had to do the public works projects for them. And that includes people that they conquered. So if they conquered a territory, all the boys would have to do that kind of work. They also had really cool roads. I was trying to find a modern day picture. Look how crazy that is to make roads through this landscape. Impressive. All right, so you've got 3 key concepts for this period then. The first one is all about trade networks. The second one is about how these new states or empires formed after period 2. And then the last one is how did people start making new food, producing new things, kind of the social structure aspect of it. So 3.1, all about the trade. So there was, all these trade routes existed, the Silk Road, the Mediterranean trade, Indian Ocean, Trans-Saharan. They just get better in period 3. Okay? They had all kind of fallen at the end of period 2 when the empires fell. But the Mongols revitalize the Silk Road, make it safer. Muslims take over the Indian Ocean. They take over the Trans-Saharan. Not sure who takes over the Mediterranean. But they revitalize them all, and they get bigger, and they have new technology, and they get more impressive. Some of the new technology they had was the compass, the astrolabe, bigger ships, the new kinds of money, like on the Silk Road when the Chinese invented the flying cash or those banks. With all of that, some people started creating leagues like the Hanseatic League, where you had like groups of people who would get together who all did similar things, like we all sell this, etc. Kind of the formation of unions, which we talked about a little bit in period 4 and 5. All right. Finally, when empires expanded, they also brought those people into those trade networks. So as China expands, more and more people are drawn into the Silk Road trade network. Same thing with the Byzantine Empire, with the Silk Road and the Mediterranean Sea trade. when the Muslim caliphites, the Abbasids and the Umayyads take over that empire, they expand the trade networks. And the Mongols, as we know, made the Silk Road safer and more people were trading. All right, so migration kind of goes along with trade. So we've got the Bantu, and here's our picture of the Bantu that we talked about. As they migrated down, they traded things, they spread things. They also caused some ruining of the environment. And then the Polynesians weren't in your book, but remember the Polynesians spread from island to island. They bring their domesticated animals, like the chickens. They use the stars to navigate and spread their language and culture. Okay. Oh, and sorry, Bantu helped spread the Swahili language. So all of this trade creates new cultural exchanges. So Islam spreads, and it creates new diasporic communities. And some people consider Muslims to be a diasporic community as they spread in this time period. We also have some travel writers who are writing about the rest of the world. Can you hear my bird clock? No, now it ended. I hope you were excited about that. So we have some travel writers who spread their knowledge about these different cultures, like Ibn Battuta and Marco Polo, write books about these other places and then go back and publish them, and people read about it to learn about what the rest of the world is like. Okay. Still on trade. Trade causes a lot of cultural diffusion. So, like we said, Confucianism combines with Buddhism to create Neo-Confucianism in China. The Muslim scholars, especially in like Baghdad and Constantinople, they are translating a lot of Greek and Indian texts into Arabic and preserving them. And in China, the creation of gunpowder and printing starts spreading. And then we also have the spread of new foods and new diseases. All right, 3.2, so all about those new states. So again, in period 1, empires collapse. The Roman Empire collapses, the Persian Empire collapses, Gupta, etc. And out of that comes new states. So the Byzantine Empire, the Sui, Tang, and Song, the Mongols. Europe becomes feudal, so does Japan. The Abbasids and Umayyad caliphates, and then China takes over surrounding areas as well. How do they spread culture? Again, the Mongols really spread a lot of it, but the Crusades do a little bit. And then 3.3 is about increased production. So how do they increase production of food? So you've got better farming techniques like terracing. This is an example of terracing where you farm into hillsides, which looks so beautiful. The Chinampa field system, those floating gardens that we talked about in the Americas. China expands their production of porcelain. The Bantu spread steel and iron techniques, maybe just iron. And then you have periods where it goes down and it goes up. So like Europe, they're not really producing as much because they go back to their feudal farms. But the Mongols are producing a lot more. You have more safe and reliable transportation because the trade routes are getting better, so that trades more things. And the Little Ice Age hasn't happened yet, so the temperatures are warmer and they're farming a lot. All right, last one. You also have increased productive capacity and its consequences. Oh, sorry, got my little thing on the other slide here. I'm just trying to see again what I had. I don't have any dates for you for next week, so that makes that easy. All right, so labor organizations, they create guilds, again, like unions. We've got forced labor like serfs in the Mita system. In most places, patriarchy is still strong with the exception of the Mongols. West Africa being matrilineal. Japan gives women a little bit more rights as well. And then you have a diffusion of all of those religions, which also changes gender roles. Okay. All right, so here, I'll add this in here as another slide. Okay, so you will not have any dates for next week. There's nothing super important because as we go back in time, the dates become so big that you'll just need to know that they happened in period 3. For your map quiz, I will put a map on the board again. The ones that you will need to know are the Swahili city-states, which are on the coast. The Sui, Tang, on the coast of Africa, sorry. The Sui, Tang, and Song dynasties, which are in China. The Byzantine Empire. Which is in Eastern Europe. The Islamic Caliphates, which are in the Middle East. The Mongols, which are everywhere, most of Asia. Polynesia, which is in Oceania, the little islands. the Incan Empire, which is in South America or Peru, and Japan. Okay, so those will be the ones that are on your quiz for next week. And I don't think I have, I'll double check right now to see if I have a map. No, that's not the right map. But I will put the map on Blend, so if you want to study that.